The Iyo sector was until recently classed as one of the more stable regions within the Imperium's fractured tapestry. At the end of M41, it was at its peak, a sector of rising wealth, robust tithe compliance, and well-administrated hive populations. Iyo had enjoyed the rare status of being both productive and relatively peaceful, with powerful neighbours offering the luxury of security. Trade routes grew, mass rebellions largely were uncommon, and the Adeptus Administratum regularly grades the sector well above the acceptable thresholds of compliance. Much of this peace is attributed to the diligence and uncompromising presence of local law enforcement, and the rich culture of imperial dogmaticism set out by the forces such as the Sisters of the Lilac Rose. Yet the Adeptus Arbites, whose reach extends from the windswept fortress courts of Scepter and Farouk to the dense underhives of Miranda, Iskaroth and Trident, and of course Sindramundi itself, are the backbone of imperial law. That being said, Iyo is no stranger to crime, subversion, corruption and disorder, but here, law is not only enforced, it is feared. Yet there are whispers. Few planets have gone untouched by investigation, and in Iyo, accusation is almost always the beginning of justice. Hello everyone and welcome back to my little corner where today we're going to be looking at the Arbites, the Arbites, the Arbiters, however you want to say it, of my Homebrew Sector of Iyo. We're going to be exploring their history, some famous actions and some heroes and conspiracies, as well as doing a mini showcase at the end. So if you enjoy it, please do like and subscribe and share it around, and let's get into it. The Arbiters were formally established in the Iyo sector during M34. After Imperial integration. Some 6 decades after the sector's founding, documentation deeming the region stable enough to warrant Lex Imperialis oversight finally made it through the administrative process, and a full sector tribunal was created under Lord Marshal Severa Bron. Their first great court, the Lex Precinctum Valkionis, was built some 12 years later on Valkion Prime, the first moon of Sindramundi, and acted as the central hub as plans were initiated to build local precincts across the civilized sector. However, with existing power structures already in place, including fully operational legal codes, a growing planetary law enforcement and customs networks, this left the Arbites with little to do but to update and oversee operations. Many of these codes and practices, seemingly or perhaps simply coincidentally, bore a striking resemblance to outdated imperial doctrine, notably from around M30 up to the heresy. From inception, the Arbiters on Sindra were trained with a heavier emphasis on high-level jurisdiction and planetary law. This was due to frequent claims of sedition and high levels of inter-house feuding. However, over the millennia to come, Iyo's newfound and fast-growing elite would galvanise control and support the Arbiters' strength, often publicly, even donating bastion fortresses, penal moons and training compounds from their newly expanding sector. But in M35-101, the Lex Precinctum Valkionis was destroyed during a catastrophic collapse that tore the moon apart. Millions dead, no enemy sighted, no declaration, just a shattering event that would leave the moon a fragmented scar across the Sindrassi sky. The event was marked as a freak gravitic implosion and the case was closed. Conspiracy theorists, however, believe this event was a retaliation by Sindramundi's elite themselves after Iron Marshal Tornes Ophion uncovered corruption within the nobility of Sindramundi, connecting them to off-world stockpiles of large-scale black market relics. Nothing was ever proven and all claimed leads were lost in the event. Survivors relocated to the newly found world of Scepter, a remote world of cold basalt monoliths. From this desolate rock, the Arbites rebuilt. Since that time, the Arbiters have expanded their jurisdiction to every major world in the Iyo sector, growing into a respected but dreaded authority. Though the sector has known order, that order has often come at the end of a gun. Recruits for Iyo's Arbiters are drawn almost exclusively from the Schola Progenium. Each prospect undergoes extensive purity testing, legal indoctrination, and combat conditioning before earning the badge and the right to distribute justice. Training emphasizes urban warfare, hive structure penetration, psychic control, and imperial law. Many judges can cite entire segments of the Lex Imperialis from memory and are expected to pass sentence without hesitation. Yet training on Scepter is merely the beginning, as many officers are then sent into the field. Unlike other sectors where arbiters are distant from local affairs, Iyos have often been embedded directly into hive justice systems throughout the sector's expansion as mere squads or lone officers, instilling fear and awe in equal measure. Their internal culture is rigid, stoic, and often very insular, with many of Iyo's people seeing them in a similar light to inquisitors. Judges refer to one another by their second names, and even among themselves, loyalty is to the law, not the arbiters, and certainly not to the worlds they oversee. Armed with shotguns, pistols, shock mauls, and often accompanied by powerful cyber mastiffs, the arbiters are a menacing sight in their black armour and with their heavy shields. Whilst their precincts house jails and prisons across the sector, in the wake of the Mistwarden Civil War, prisoners of Iyo have largely been transported to the world of Dead Star, the last surviving planet of an ancient collapsed star, cold and desolate. This world of dark rock and darkness is as bleak as its largely windowless stations. Here, the worst criminals in the eyes of Imperial law will live in iron cells in city-sized prison facilities. If they are unable or unwilling to join the ranks of the penal legions, or working in Iyo's many labour camps, then it is likely that this is where their fate will reside. Officially, corruption within the arbiters is minimal in Iyo. Those found guilty are purged without ceremony, and yet there are sealed cases, shadow assignments, and untraceable redeployments. Worse yet, in the quietest of corners, whispers emerge that nearly all arbiters' precincts in Iyo and beyond in fact draw legal doctrine from the heretical Carthus editions of the Lex, a damned copy of the Lex Imperialis that was distributed before and during M41. For how long? No one knows. Claims fell on Iyo's world of Miranda, yet nothing was proven, and blame was eventually placed on an out-of-sector world known as Carthus Minora. The fear is that only a handful on ancient shrine worlds and distant sectors or Imperial Navy stations maintain direct copies of the true Terran Lex Imperialis. If true, and depending on how deep the rot goes, these accusations could mean Iyo and neighbouring sectors, perhaps even the entire segmentum, could be issuing heretical justice. The number of infected worlds within the galaxy at large could potentially outweigh the pure. But to challenge this is to challenge the entire foundation of Imperial governance, and Iyo's worlds have fallen under scrutiny more than once for such a claim. So far, they have been exonerated, so to accuse again would need proof beyond doubt. So for now, the system continues. Over the millennia of Iyo's growth, the arbiters have conducted several large-scale operations that echo across the history of the sector, and almost every millennia has had some form of great event. Firstly, there was the Dimitri Glasswork Revolt of M35. When planetary exports failed inspection, the arbiters launched a 6-month siege, grounding all atmospheric traffic. Riots on the industrial world of Dimitri transitioned into open rebellion. Arbiters dropped cyclonic munitions on civil assembly areas. Casualties were unrecorded, but the ruling Industrial Council was purged, and the Arbiters' custodians replaced several governors for the next 4 decades. The siege was ultimately completed in 49 hours. Then there was the Sable bombardment of M36. A cult on the newly founded world of Genna attempted to introduce forbidden psycho rites within the capital city of Sable. It was crushed by Arbiters' siege squads and an orbital bombardment. 12,000 citizens were later executed and 34,000 public records were destroyed. M37 brought the Mistwarden Purge. Undisclosed civil war in the world of Mistwarden led to failure to meet tithe quotas. Allegations of cult activity led to a vast ground war against rebel forces and resulted in an entire planetary governor's office being dissolved and 9,000 executions without trial. Whilst officially over, it is claimed the war for Mistwarden never truly ended. M38 would bring Operation Iron Scourge, a full precinct purge of gang clans in the now infamous Antares Hive on the world of Chariot. Arbiters units razed entire hab blocks, eradicated 5 major crime families, and executed over 20,000 registered citizens under mass criminal codes. Shortly after would bring the purge of Kirill Voss, the largest single deployment in Iyo Arbites history. A massive religious insurrection led to a civil war and required 3 full years to contain. Arbiters were deployed alongside Militarum, Sororitas and Astartes forces. estimates suggest billions died in the conflict, and it's claimed almost 50 million were executed or vanished in judicial purges. However, for all their glory, the Varus redaction of M39 marked one of the most egregious breaches of Arbiters protocol in the sector's recorded history. High Proctor Elton Varus was quietly apprehended after it was discovered he had orchestrated the systematic purging of thousands of data vault entries, including criminal ledgers, shipment registries, and revised planetary judgments, specifically targeting records implicating the aristocracy of Sindramundi. Though formally executed for gross dereliction, no records of his deleted archives would ever be recovered. Decades upon decades of work was erased, leaving potentially thousands of people to escape prosecution and justice. Then came the Carthus Minora extermination of M41. Whilst not in sector, the world of Carthus Minora was accused of altering copies of the Lex Imperialis during distribution. This planet was subjected to a full review, yet would place the blame on the sector of Iyo and the world of Miranda. However, records would not line up, indicating the book's origins to come from a world destroyed sometime during the Nova Terra interregnum. Miranda would apparently also have no record of sending copies of the Lex to Carthus in any way. This discrepancy resulted in the blame falling completely on Carthus, and were accused of rewriting imperial law, and the entire world, was purged. However, the turn of M42 has brought new problems, as the refusal of planetary governors on Sana 12 to deliver their tithe has sparked open rebellion. Arbites have led a suppression campaign assisted by Militarum forces over the past 11 months, and 2 entire hives have been sealed and left to starve. So far, conflict continues with no end in sight. Within the Arbites of the Iyo sector, there are many famous judges, squads, and branches. Here, we can only name a few. A good example is the Centurions, an elite team of arbiters known for their brutal tactics during the Iron Scourge. Their suppression of the Antares clan leaders became the model for hive clan eradication across multiple worlds, even to the modern day. Then there is Enforcer Prime Dovran Kalvek, strategist of the Ovorus Underhive operation on Kirill Voss. Kalvek specialised in using psychosuppression and served as shock units in dense urban warfare. Next is Blackcloak Viridia. A deep infiltration operative, Viridia spent 7 years embedded in heretical cult before executing its leadership during a mass gathering alone. She fought her way out of the building, executing all cult members before dying from her wounds. Her image is now painted on the walls of the Lex Precinctum Septuros in memory of her deeds. Lastly to mention, there is the Justicar's Mantle, a famed precinct ship that operates in high orbit over target worlds, raining down judgments from orbit and deploying RPG squads via drop lancers. Known for precision strikes and its prison vault decks capable of housing thousands of prisoners at a time. At the time of Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, Iyo was at its most glorious. The sector enjoyed the reputation of order, stability, and loyal compliance. Trade moves, tithes were met, and rebellions rare. And yet, across the millennia of its existence, nearly every world not directly administered or allied with the capital has faced the Emperor's justice in some form. Investigations are never without cause. Accusations are never without consequence. Yet despite the obvious nature that something is going on behind the scenes, so far the Arbiters have been happy to allow Syndra's elite to rule the sector as they may. Now, however, the warp cuts off billions of tourists and pilgrims from returning to their home worlds. Nobles by the millions rack up credit with lenders and brokers to stay in moderate luxury, where the poor seek refuge in camps and on the streets and the cities across the sector. Pirates and gangs rise in power, and revolution seems imminent on worlds across the sector. Whilst the Arbites state that the law reigns, in the long shadows behind it, is it possible that there are those who move untouched, above the law, or beyond its reach? And what does the law even mean if the Imperium's world can't trust the words of their own Lex? Well, that's it for the lore, guys. As you can see, these are just regular Arbites straight out the box, but when building them I found that they didn't quite look as dynamic as I wanted, so I tried to improve that by using different arms on different bodies and adding basically as many shooting poses as possible. This mainly involved raising up the guns. This worked really well on the shotgun guy here. Ultimately I was just trying to replicate the pose on the artwork of the box as seen here, but I don't think it worked quite so well on the pistol guys. This one looks good as he's moving forward. He's got a nice moving forward pose, got his open mouth, looks like he's shouting something like freeze, get down, or whatever he's doing. But the issue is that the gun really is at an angle. With the base figure, you're meant to make him has the gun down and to the side, so raising it, he still has a bit of a wonky tilt to the gun. I think it still works. This guy sort of looks like a bit like he's shooting around a corner perhaps, held a little bit by his head tilting, but the first one out of these two I thought worked better of these pistol guys anyway. This next pistol guy looks quite good too. He's just using the normal one-handed pistol arm that you get with the medic or the dog handler figure. However, I cut off the corner of the injection points of the sprue. Basically, when you get a sprue, you get little injection point molds, like the points where the injection mold came in, little circle bits. Just cut them off at an angle and stick these in the armpit to widen out the pose. It works really well. You can do it with a lot of different figures. I've got another couple of figures that I'm going to be showing you in the future that I've also done this for, and it works really well with things like Space Marines. Just if you want like a bit of a wider pose, just cut off that sprue injection point at an angle. Works brilliantly. I then cut off the lead for the dog and attached it to his other hand because I think it looks really cool. Looks like he's holding the lead and them all at the same time, and he's just a very imposing stance. Has that Judge Dredd look to him really. This guy is simply swapping a shield onto another arm, making him left-handed, and then we go on to the sniper. I use some green stuff to make a cloak and change his body and legs. As the ones you're meant to put him with don't really look like they're ready for the recoil of the gun that size. Whilst none of them were great, I thought these were the best ones. As the legs are sort of like leaning forward slightly, I then tilted the gun down slightly just to add to the flow of the shape of the figure. And like I say, that green stuff cloak just helps with the shape of that silhouette, I think. Here is the leader, who I've simply added a green stuff shoulder cloak to. Simple, but I think it works, makes him stand out quite well. In truth, I actually had to use a pauldron from one of the Sisters of Battle, which is actually under the green stuff, as I lost one of the regular pauldrons in the making process. But they're roughly the same shape, so you can't tell, and I think it worked really well. And in saying that I lost a pauldron, this last one here is who I call the Recruit, who's missing a pauldron, and not because I lost that one too, but because you only get 10 in a box, and there's 11 figures here that I'm using, and I've got another figure who I want to add to this squad at some point, but I've just kept that shoulder pad back for that. But this works for a Recruit, I think. I added a stick instead of having the full maul, and I cut off the DNA ID gun thing that they use, and I've stuck it on her side, so she's got that as a bit of kit too. The head is actually from a third-party bit. It's from a company called Statuesque Miniatures. They offer a variety of different like female heads. They all come in metal, and different sizes too. They come in like large, small. I think they've got like a pulp version and a tiny version. And I would advise going for the Guard, Arbites, Sisters of Battle, anything like that. Go for the pulp size. On the website and I think like, online and stuff, they advise you use the small ones. And they show images too, but I actually still in the images think they look too big, especially now that the more modern GW models have a more realistic proportion. The smaller heads just look better, and so I would advise going for the pulp version. They look really good. Unfortunately, my painting just makes them look really bad, but they are really, really nice heads, and I would highly advise getting them, especially because they have like ponytails and things like that that you don't usually get with miniatures. But all I had to do was build up the neck a bit by cutting off the helmet of a spare head and then super gluing the head onto that. Worked brilliantly. But that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. I've been working a lot recently, so it's put me behind somewhat in my release of videos and stuff, so there are going to be more coming, including more regiments, some traitor guard again, or traitors at least, some Xenos, so I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.